The galaxy was a tomb, and humanity had arrived with shovels. We were the cosmic junkmen, the inheritors of a silence left behind by gods who had torn each other to pieces. For 500 years, the Architect Confederacy and the Githar hegemony had waged a war that burned stars from the sky and cracked planets like eggs. They were titans, ancient and terrible, wielding forces that bent space-time into weapons and built fleets from the hearts of dying suns. We, humanity, were still figuring out how to keep our recycled air scrubbers from smelling like week-old socks. We'd stumbled out of our solar system on jury-rigged fusion drives to find the grand galactic stage empty, the curtains in tatters, and the audience long dead. The war was over, not because one side had won, but because both had ceased to exist, leaving behind a graveyard stretching across a dozen sectors, a cosmic scrap heap of incomprehensible technology and shattered dreams. This was our frontier, the graveyard of giants, and my ship, the Vagrant, was my shovel. She was an ugly, stubborn beast of a hauler, her hull a patchwork quilt of mismatched alloys from 100 different wrecks, her engines coughing and sputtering like a dying old man. But she was mine, or rather, she was the bank's. And the bank had a very long memory and very little patience. Every dent in her hull was a story, and every story was a debt. On board, I had my crew, the only family a man like me could afford. Jax was my muscle, a mountain of a man who had been genetically tailored for some corporate war on a forgotten colony, left with nothing but a clearance chip in his skull and a deep-seated distrust of anyone in a clean uniform. He didn't talk much, but when a hydraulic press failed or a rival salvage crew got greedy, his silence was more persuasive than a lawyer's argument. Then there was Lena, my navigator and sensor tech, a woman who saw the universe not as a collection of stars and gravity wells, but as a symphony. She claimed every star, every wreck, every particle of dust sang a unique song, and she could hear it all. Most people thought she was crazy, a savant fried by a bad neural link, but she could thread the Vagrant through a debris field that would shred a naval cruiser, all while humming off key to a tune only she could hear. Finally, there was Spark, a kid barely out of his teens with a mess of wires for hair and a sacred reverence for alien tech. He didn't just fix things, he communed with them, laying his hands on a dead console and coaxing it back to life with a whispered prayer and a bit of percussive maintenance. He was the only one on the ship who still had hope in his eyes, a dangerous commodity in the graveyard. We were hunting for ghost steel and memory crystals, anything we could pry loose and sell to the brokers on Station 7 just enough to make the next fuel payment and keep the repo men from our door. It was a bleak, repetitive existence, punctuated by moments of sheer terror. That cycle broke on a Tuesday, Galactic Standard. We were skimming the edge of the Kilion Abyss, a nasty stretch of space where the final battle of the war had supposedly taken place. The place was a navigational nightmare, littered with shattered capital ships and pockets of warped reality that could age a man 1,000 years in the blink of an eye. Lena was tense at her console, her fingers tracing patterns in the air as she listened to the void. "It's quiet, Elias," she murmured, her eyes unfocused. "Too quiet. The static is gone. It's like the universe is holding its breath." I was about to make a crack about the universe needing better hygiene when a single, pure note cut through the silence of her sensors. It wasn't the chaotic chorus of a wreck. It was a clear, resonant chime, low and steady. Spark's head shot up from the guts of a power conduit he was tinkering with. "Captain," he breathed, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. "That's an architect signature. A big one. Primeval class. But It's clean. No decay. No radiation bleed. It's like it was powered down 5 minutes ago. On the main viewer, a shape began to resolve itself from the swirling nebular dust. It was impossible. A vessel the size of a small moon. A blade of obsidian and silver that drank the starlight around it. Its lines were elegant, flowing, more like something grown than built. The hallmark of the architects. We all knew the silhouette. It was a legend, a ghost story told by spacers in dimly lit bars. The Star Eater, flagship of the architect fleet, the most powerful dreadnought ever constructed. It had vanished without a trace in the war's final days, presumed destroyed in some cataclysmic final engagement. And it was just sitting here, silent, intact. The potential haul was staggering. A ship like that, even stripped for parts, would be worth more than entire planets. It was the score of a lifetime. The kind of find that didn't just clear your debts, but erase the memory that you ever had them. "Take us in, Lena," I said, my voice hoarse. Jax moved to the weapons console, his heavy frame settling into the gunner's seat with a quiet groan of stressed metal. He didn't have to ask. It was instinct. A prize this big was bound to attract sharks. Lena hesitated, a rare sight. "The song is wrong, Elias," she whispered, a bead of sweat tracing a path down her temple. "It's a beautiful note, but it's hollow. There's no echo. It feels like a trap." I looked at the image of the super dreadnought hanging in the void, a promise of salvation forged in alien metal. I thought of the final notice from the Finance Guild, the worn-out faces of my crew, the constant, grinding pressure of just trying to survive. "Every song is a trap, Lena," I told her, my eyes fixed on the screen. "This one just pays better. Take us in slow and quiet." The vagrant felt like a flea approaching a god as we drew closer. The Star Eater was pristine. There were no scorch marks, no hull breaches, no sign of the apocalyptic battle it was supposed to have been a part of. It was so perfect, it was unnerving. We latched on with magnetic clamps near a secondary airlock, the clang of our hull against its own echoing with profound finality. The ship was cold, a deep, penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the vacuum of space. The airlock cycled open with a whisper of ancient, perfectly maintained machinery, revealing a corridor that stretched into clean, sterile darkness. "Power is active," Spark reported over the comms, his voice buzzing. "Life support, internal gravity. Everything's on standby. It's waiting for a command." Jax, Spark, and I went across, our mag boots clamping to the deck with loud thuds. The silence was the first thing that truly hit us. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was an active, suppressing presence. It felt like walking through deep water, a pressure on your eardrums and a weight on your soul. Sound didn't travel right. The clicks of our gear, our own breathing, it all sounded flat, absorbed by the very air. The ship was immaculate. Polished chrome walls reflected our distorted figures. Emergency lights pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, but there was a thin layer of fine gray dust over everything, like ash. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, no emergency bulkheads slammed shut. It was a ghost ship in the truest sense, abandoned by its crew in the middle of a breath. We moved towards the command deck, our rifle lights cutting sharp, lonely paths through the gloom. Jax took point, his cannon sweeping every intersecting corridor, his head on a constant, paranoid swivel. "I don't like this," he grunted, his voice a low rumble that barely carried. "My skin's crawling. Feels like we're being watched by a million eyes. He was right. The feeling of being observed was overwhelming. But there was nothing there, just empty corridors and the suffocating silence. As we pushed deeper, we began to see them. Strange, crystalline growths, like frost ferns made of obsidian glass, sprouting from the consoles and creeping along the walls. They pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, a cold, violet light that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. Spark knelt beside one, his scanner whining uselessly. "I can't get a reading," he muttered, baffled. "It's not organic, not mineral. It's like frozen data, physical information." He reached out a gloved hand to touch it, and I slapped it away. "Don't touch anything," I snapped. We find the bridge. We download the logs and nav data, and we get out. We found a terminal in an officer's quarters that was still partially active. Spark jacked in, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Most of the data was gone, not deleted, but sublimated. The files were like hollowed-out husks, but he found fragments, corrupted logs from the ship's final hours. The words flickered across the screen. A chilling poem of desperation. They broke the pact. Gathar deployed the unmaking. We have no choice. The final solution. Echo's kiss is armed. May the void forgive us. Echo's kiss. Jax read over Spark's shoulder. Sounds like a weapon. Before Spark could dig any deeper, Lena's voice crackled in our helmets, strained and panicked. "Elias, get out of there. The ship it's waking up. I can hear it. It's not a machine. It's a memory. It's starting to remember." As she spoke, the violet light from the crystal growths intensified. A low hum started, a vibration that resonated deep in our bones and made our teeth ache. The silence was receding, replaced by faint, staticky whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The ghosts of 1,000 last words, all spoken at once. In our peripheral vision, shimmering, translucent shapes flickered in and out of existence, the faint after-images of the Architect crew, forever trapped in the moment of their passing. This wasn't a prize. It was a tomb, and the dead were stirring. We were no longer salvagers. We were trespassers in a haunted house the size of a city. Ignoring Lena's frantic pleas, I made the call. "We're too close." We pushed to the main reactor. If there's a weapon, its power source will be routed from there. That's our prize. It was a stupid, greedy decision born of desperation, and it was going to get us all killed. We found the engineering bay, a cavernous space that housed a contained singularity, a miniature black hole that powered the gargantuan ship. And there, suspended in a web of conduits and energy fields at the center of the chamber, was the source of the hum. The crystals were thickest here, forming a massive, jagged cocoon around a central containment sphere. Inside the sphere, something shifted. It wasn't a machine or a creature. It was a tear in reality, a shimmering wound of non-Euclidean geometry and impossible colors that twisted the light and space around it. It was beautiful, and it was horrifying. "That's it," Spark whispered, his face pale in the eerie glow. "Echo's kiss. It's not a bomb. It's a resonance cascade, a weapon that doesn't destroy matter. It erases its history. It unmakes things." He stepped forward, compelled by a suicidal curiosity, and raised his Omni tool to try and get a scan. The moment his tool's beam touched the containment field, all hell broke loose. The humming intensified into a deafening roar that wasn't sound but pure psychic pressure. The anomaly inside the sphere pulsed violently, and a wave of force slammed into us, throwing us from our feet. An image flooded our minds. A single, shared vision that was not seen, but felt the final silent scream of the Star Eater's crew. We saw them at their posts, their faces masks of terror, not as they were attacked, but as they simply ceased. They dissolved, their bodies unraveling into streams of light and data, their voices becoming the whispers in the walls, their memories seeding the crystalline growths. They weren't killed, they were recorded, erased from the present and imprinted onto the ship itself. The vision vanished, leaving us gasping on the floor, our heads splitting. The containment field around the anomaly was flickering, cracks of dark energy spiderwebbing across its surface. The crystals on the walls began to grow at an explosive rate, covering everything in their cold, glassy sheen. Then, a new sound cut through the psychic din, a sound I knew all too well, the charging whine of weapon systems. Alarms blared through the ship, klaxons that had been silent for 500 years screaming a belated warning. Red combat lighting bathed the corridors in blood. On the outer hull, gun turrets the size of skyscrapers began to stir, their barrels glowing with ancient, murderous energy. Lena's voice shrieked over the comms. "Elias, its weapons are online. It's targeting the vagrant. The magnetic clamps are fused. We're trapped." I scrambled to my feet, my heart hammering against my ribs. We had come looking for treasure, but had found a curse. We hadn't just boarded a ghost ship. We had woken up its ghost, and its last memory was of war. The anomaly pulsed again, brighter this time, and a sliver of its impossible energy leaked from the failing containment field. Striking a nearby bulkhead, the metal didn't melt or explode. It simply vanished, leaving a perfectly smooth, cauterized hole that led to the star-dusted void outside. We were trapped inside a waking superweapon with a reality-eating cancer at its heart, and it was starting to remember how to kill. There is no time for thought in the heart of a scream, only instinct. The universe had torn a hole in itself 10 meters from my face, and that hole was growing. "Move!" I roared, the words swallowed by the psychic shriek of the awakening ship. "Back to the airlock, now!" Jax was already on his feet, hauling a stunned Spark up by the collar of his envirosuit. The kid's eyes were wide with a terrible, beautiful understanding, his mind still trying to process the weapon that unwrote reality. We scrambled back the way we came, our mag boots slipping on the deck, plating that was now slick with a strange, oily condensation. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were a chorus of the damned, 1,000 architect voices speaking in unison, their words weaving a tapestry of their final, shared moment of terror. Behind us, the containment field around Echo's kiss shattered completely. The anomaly didn't explode, it bloomed, a silent, ravenous flower of anti-existence. It didn't expand with heat or force, but with absence. A support pillar, thick as an ancient redwood, was touched by its edge. It didn't crumble or melt. Its history was scooped out, leaving a perfectly smooth, concave void in its place. The ship groaned, a tectonic shifting of a hull protesting its own slow erasure. Lena's voice was a frantic lifeline in our helmets, cutting through the spectral noise. "Elias, weapon charge at 40%. Its main energy cannons are locking on. The vagrant's proximity alarms are screaming. What did you do? Guilt was a luxury I couldn't afford. We woke the dead." "Lena, just be ready to punch it the second those clamps release." A heavy bulkhead door slammed down in the corridor ahead, its descent so fast it nearly guillotined Jax. He didn't even flinch, just raised his plasma cannon and fired, blasting a molten crater through the reinforced alloy. The ship was actively fighting us now, not with sentience, but with the spasms of a dying nervous system. It was a body thrashing in the throes of a nightmare, and we were the grit caught in its teeth. As we ran, the haunting grew more potent. The translucent after images of the architect crew became more solid. Their movements no longer random flickers. They were reenacting their final duties. Engineers phased through the walls, their phantom hands making adjustments to consoles that had been dead for centuries. Officers strode down the corridors, their expressions grim, their forms so real I found myself dodging out of their way. They didn't see us, couldn't interact with us. But their presence was a chilling reminder that we were running through a mass grave where the ghosts still thought they were alive. One of them, a tall, elegant figure in a commander's regalia, materialized directly in front of Jax. He tried to sidestep, but the ghost passed right through him. Jax froze, a guttural cry escaping his lips as he staggered back, his face ashen. I felt it. He choked out, his hands trembling. Felt everything. The resignation, the fear. He knew they were going to die. The ship was using its own memories as a weapon, flooding our minds with the crew's final emotions, trying to drown us in a tide of ancient despair. We had to keep moving. Weapon charge at 70%, Elias. Lena's voice was fraying. The outer hull is starting to ionize. I can feel the energy build up. You have maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We were still deep in the belly of the beast, a 10-minute run from the airlock at best. The ship was too big, the path too treacherous. We were never going to make it. We can't get out, I said, the words tasting like ash. New plan, but we're not running from it anymore. We're going to the bridge. Spark looked at me like I'd gone insane. The bridge captain. The ship is trying to kill us. What are we going to do on the bridge? It's not trying to kill us, I shot back, my mind racing, connecting the fragments we'd seen. It's trying to kill the Gathar. It's a machine. Spark. A ghost in a machine. Its last order was to fight. It's stuck in a loop, replaying its last battle, and it thinks the vagrant is the enemy. Hope. Thin and sharp as a shard of glass. Cut through my panic. If we can get to the bridge, we can interrupt that loop, terminate the command, make it see we're not the threat. It was a wild gamble, a prayer whispered in a hurricane, but it was the only one we had. Lena, where's the bridge relative to our position? My voice was calm, a captain's lie. Inside, my nerves were screaming. There was a pause, filled with the crackle of static and the hum of a dying starship. 3 levels up, Sector Alpha. But the ship is changing. The corridors are shifting. The internal schematics I downloaded are useless. It's forgetting its own geography. It was worse than I thought. The reality-erasing effect of Echo's kiss wasn't just contained in engineering. It was spreading, a cancer of memory eating away at the ship's structure. The ship wasn't just replaying a memory, it was becoming one. We found a central access shaft, a gaping maw that plunged into the ship's core and ascended into darkness. Gravity plating was sporadic, flickering on and off, turning the climb into a death-defying dance between crushing weight and terrifying freefall. We ascended, pulling ourselves up on service conduits and exposed girders as the ship groaned and reconfigured itself around us. Below, the violet glow from engineering was growing, casting the shaft in the light of a bruise. The whispers intensified. No longer just the architect crew. Now they were our own. I heard my father's disappointed voice from 20 years ago. I saw the face of a crewman I'd lost in a decompression accident, his eyes accusing me. The ship was digging into our minds now, pulling out our own ghost to throw at us. Jax grunted in pain, shaking his head as if to dislodge a wasp. Spark had his eyes squeezed shut, muttering complex equations to himself, a mantra against the psychic onslaught. We reached the upper level and burst into a wide, ceremonial hall that hadn't been on any schematic. The ceiling was a dome of star-flecked crystal, now cracked and weeping a slow, viscous black fluid. And the hall was not empty. Here, the ghosts were fighting. Lances of phantom energy, silent and strobing, tore through the air. Architect soldiers, shimmering and translucent, took cover behind pillars that flickered in and out of existence, exchanging fire with grotesque, hulking apparitions the Gathar. They were brutish creatures, all carapace and jagged claws, their spectral forms radiating pure malice. We were standing in the middle of a memory of the final boarding action. "Don't stop," I yelled, pulling Spark along as he stared in horrified awe. "They can't hurt you. It's not real." I was wrong. A Gathar phantom, a brute the size of a cargo loader, charged through an architect soldier and swung a massive spectral cleaver. The cleaver passed through a section of the deck, plating right next to my foot. The plating didn't break. It simply ceased to be, erased by the lingering, venomous memory of the Gathar weapon. Their technology was the antithesis of the architects, not unmaking history, but annihilating it with such force that it left scars on the present. We were running through a crossfire of two different kinds of oblivion. 90% charge, Lena screamed, her voice distorting with raw terror. "I can see the gun ports glowing. Elias, they're about to fire. I'm sorry." "Hold on, Lena," I grunted, shoving Jax toward a massive doorway at the far end of the hall, the gilded sigils marking it as the entrance to the bridge. "Just hold on." The doors were sealed shut, fused by time and the strange energies flooding the ship. Jax lowered his shoulder and charged, a bull made of flesh and fury. He hit the door with a sound like a thunderclap, and the ancient metal groaned but held. He hit it again, roaring with effort, and a hairline crack appeared. On the third impact, the door buckled inward with a shriek of tearing metal, and we spilled through onto the command deck of the Star Eater. The view was apocalyptic, and the bridge was a grand amphitheater, its forward wall a single, sweeping canopy of diamond-hard crystal that looked out upon the Kellyan abyss, but the view was overwritten. Through the canopy we didn't see the familiar, battered hull of the Vagrant. We saw a Gathar Obliterator-class battleship, its ugly, weapon-studded form hanging in space, spitting phantom fire. The ship's memory was so powerful it was projecting its enemy over reality, painting a target on my ship, on Lena. The bridge itself was a garden of the obsidian crystals. They covered every console, every surface, pulsing in time with the ship's heartbeat. And in the center of it all, sitting in the ornate command chair, was him, the architect commander. He was more solid than the other ghosts, almost opaque, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid with authority. His long, slender fingers rested on the glowing console, and his eyes, cold and ancient, were fixed on the phantom Gathar ship. He was the focal point of the memory, Tulsamit, the ghost driving the machine. We were ants in his dying dream. "Captain," Spark breathed, pointing at the main console. "The firing sequence. It's not automated. It's him. His neural interface is still active, looped into the ship's core. He's the one giving the order. We couldn't just shut it off. We had to break the will of a ghost, a 500-year-old echo of a long-dead admiral still fighting his final battle. I took a step forward, my voice echoing in the crystalline chamber. Commander, your war is over. Your crew is dead. You are an echo, a memory. Stand down. The ghost didn't react. His eyes remained locked on his enemy. The hum of the main cannons charging reached a fever pitch, a high-pitched keen that vibrated through the deck. "It can't hear you," Jax growled, raising his cannon. "It's a recording. Let me try to sever the console." He already took aim, but as he did, the ghost's head slowly turned, its gaze passing over us as if we were dust motes, and then it settled on Jax. A wave of pure psychic force, cold and immense, slammed into us. It was not an attack. It was a feeling. The weight of 1 billion lives on his shoulders. The agony of ordering a weapon that would erase his own people to deny the enemy their prize. It was the commander's final burden, and he shared it with us. Jax screamed and fell to his knees, his cannon clattering to the floor. Spark collapsed, bleeding from his nose. My own vision swam, the crushing despair of a lost god threatening to snuff out my consciousness. This was his defense. Not walls or guns, but a firewall of pure, concentrated sorrow. Outside, a blinding white light began to build at the tips of the Star Eater's primary cannons. The ship was about to fire. Lena was about to die. We were on the bridge, at the heart of the problem, and we were utterly, hopelessly powerless to stop it. The ghost of the commander raised a single, translucent hand, and the phantom Gathar ship in the viewport began to burn. Desperation is the mother of truly terrible ideas. As the architect commander's psychic grief crushed us and the light of imminent annihilation bloomed outside, a single, insane thought sliced through the pain. We couldn't fight the ghost's memory, so we had to give it a new one. "Spark," I yelled, my voice a ragged gasp. "Your Omni tool, can you interface with the ship's internal comms? Not to talk, to broadcast." The kid was on the floor, curled into a fetal position, but my words seemed to cut through his stupor. He fumbled for the tool strapped to his wrist, his movements clumsy and slow. "Broadcast what, Captain?" he whimpered, his face a mask of pain. "A lullaby. The ship's fried." "Not the ship's comms," I clarified, crawling toward the main console, every inch in agony against the psychic pressure. "I need you to broadcast something from the Vagrant. Lena, can you hear me?" Her voice came back, shockingly calm, a single clear note of acceptance in a symphony of chaos. "I hear you, Elias. It's beautiful, in a terrifying way. The stars are bright tonight." She was saying goodbye. "Don't you dare," I screamed into my helmet. "Lena, I need you to find a file in the ship's media library, anything with music. The older, the better. Something loud and messy and human. Push it to us. Now." It made no sense. It was the Hail Mary of a dying man, but human art, our chaotic, emotional, illogical noise, was the most alien thing this ancient, orderly ghost could possibly encounter. For a moment, there was only the rising keen of the cannons and the crushing weight of the commander's sorrow. Then, a new sound crackled through our helmets, faint at first, then growing louder. It wasn't the sterile, perfect tones of architect technology. It was raw, distorted, and gloriously alive. It was the screech of an electric guitar, the pounding of a drum kit, and the rebellious yell of a long-dead rock singer. Lena was blasting a 20th century classic, A primal scream of defiance and rage set to a 4/4 beat. Spark, with a surge of adrenaline, managed to jack his tool into a console port. His fingers, stained with his own blood, danced across the interface. "Got it," he yelled, his voice cracking, rerouting the vagrant signal, pushing it through the bridge's local emitters. The effect was instantaneous and bizarre. The raw, guttural music exploded from the bridge's crystalline speakers, a wave of pure, anarchic sound that slammed into the oppressive silence. It was like throwing a bucket of paint at a ghost. The architect commander flinched. For the first time, the spectral figure showed a reaction, its head tilted, its serene, sorrowful expression twisting into one of confusion. The psychic pressure lessened, the immense grief wavering as this new, incomprehensible data flooded its senses. The wail of the guitar solo was a language of emotion. It had no framework for not grief, not duty, just pure, unadulterated passion. The translucent Gathar battleship in the viewport flickered, its image distorting as the memory powering it was disrupted. The blinding light from the cannons outside dimmed, the charge dropping from 100% to 90, then 80. It was working. "Keep it coming. Lena!" I shouted, a wild, incredulous laugh bubbling in my chest. "Give him the whole concert." The song ended, and another began. This one a blues track, slower, filled with the pain of a human heart, a sorrow that was personal and raw, not the vast, cosmic despair of the commander. It was a different flavor of sadness, one that was meant to be shared, not just endured. The ghost of the commander slowly rose from his chair. "Oh, sway." The projected Githar ship vanished completely, replaced once more by the gritty, familiar form of the vagrant. My ugly, beautiful ship, still alive, still there. The weapon systems went silent. The commander turned his full attention to us, his ancient eyes no longer seeing through us, but at us. The psychic pressure was gone, replaced by a feeling of immense, weary curiosity. He took a step, and another, gliding across the deck until he stood before me. He was a giant, his head nearly touching the ceiling, and as he drew near, the air grew cold. He raised a long, spectral hand and pointed, not at me, but at Spark's Omni-tool, the source of the strange new song. A new voice entered our minds, not a whisper, but a clear, resonant thought, like a bell struck in a vacuum. It wasn't a language of words, but of pure concept. "What is this feeling? This ordered chaos?" "It's music," I said aloud, my voice trembling. "It's how we feel. It's how we remember without becoming ghosts." The commander seemed to process this, his form flickering. The obsidian crystals around the room pulsed, their violet light softening. The ship wasn't fighting anymore, it was listening. But the danger wasn't over. As the commander's iron will relaxed, the true problem reasserted itself. A tremor ran through the ship, far deeper and more violent than before. From the direction of the engineering bay, the violet glow intensified, and the sound of reality tearing itself apart returned, louder and more urgent. "Captain," Spark said, his eyes on a flickering diagnostic screen. "The weapon, Echo's kiss." When the commander's loop was broken, the containment protocols he was mentally enforcing, they failed completely. The anomaly is expanding. It's not just erasing the ship anymore. It's going to erase this entire sector of space. We had saved ourselves from the frying pan only to land in the singularity. The commander turned his gaze from us, looking back toward the heart of his ship. The thought he projected was laced with a new emotion, one we hadn't felt before regret. "I have failed. The unmaking cannot be contained. Then help us, I pleaded, getting to my feet. There has to be a way to stop it. A failsafe. A shutdown sequence. He looked back at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw not a ghost, but the man he had been a leader who had made an impossible choice. The failsafe is the star. This ship was designed to die in the heart of a sun, its systems and the weapon it carries purified by stellar fire. But I can no longer give the command. His last act had trapped him, his final order to fire the main weapons overriding all other functions. He was a phantom helmsman, his hands frozen on a wheel he could no longer turn. But I could. My eyes darted around the bridge, landing on the navigation console, a throne of crystal and light. If I can get the ship moving, I thought aloud. If I can plot a course to the nearest star. Kilion Prime, Jax grunted, pointing his cannon at the viewport, at a brilliant blue-white star that dominated the celestial sphere. It's right there. But the engines have been cold for 500 years. They'll never power up in time. They don't have to. Spark interjected, his mind now working at frantic speed. The main cannons, the energy they charge to fire, it's still in the capacitors. It's a massive amount of power. Captain, if we can reroute it, we could use it to jumpstart the main drive. It would be a one-shot deal, a controlled explosion, basically. But it might be enough to push us into the star's gravity well. It was a plan forged from scrap metal and desperation, just like my ship. It was a human plan. Do it, I ordered. Jax helped me to the navigation console. It was designed for the architect's six-fingered hands and alien neurology, but the core principles were the same: point and go. The ghost of the commander watched us, a silent, passive observer to the frantic activity of these strange, noisy creatures who had invaded his tomb. Spark worked like a man possessed, his hands a blur as he bypassed ancient safety protocols and rerouted unimaginable amounts of energy. Alarms, real ones this time, blared through the bridge as power conduits overloaded and entire sections of the ship went dark. "It's going to be a rough ride," Spark yelled over the din. "I'm bypassing the inertial dampeners. Brace yourselves." I gripped the console as I input the final commands, my knuckles white. The ship shuddered violently, not the slow, structural groaning of before, but the violent roar of a slumbering beast being kicked awake. On the viewport, the star Kilion Prime grew larger. We were moving. The ship was a falling stone, and the sun was our target. The acceleration was brutal, slamming us against the back of the bridge. The lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness, illuminated only by the growing star, the frantic red of the emergency alerts, and the soft, violet glow of the ever-expanding anomaly behind us. The unmaking was catching up. I could feel it. A cold numbness creeping up my spine as the very fabric of the ship behind us was eaten away. The aft sections of the Star Eater were ceasing to exist, and the void was gaining on us. Through the chaos, the Architect Commander remained standing, a pillar of calm. He looked at me, and a final thought, clear and precise, entered my mind. It was not a plea or a command. It was a transfer of knowledge, a data burst of schematics, coordinates, and warnings. It was the location of the Architect's final refuge, a place called the Silent Archive, hidden from the war, from the Gathar, from the rest of the galaxy. It was a final gift, an inheritance. Our knowledge must not be lost. Our story must not be unmade. Remember us. Then he turned and walked toward the back of the bridge, toward the advancing wave of absolute nothingness that had been his final, terrible weapon. He didn't fade or dissolve. He simply walked into the void, his form swallowed by the erasure he had unleashed, a captain going down with his ship. "The clamps are disengaging," Lena's voice, a beacon of hope, cut through the noise. "The Star Eater's movement is tearing them loose. I'm free, Elias. Get out of there." I looked at Jax and Spark, both clinging to consoles to stay upright. The airlock was a lifetime away, and the ship was tearing itself apart around us. "No time, Lena," I said, my voice heavy with a decision I never wanted to make. "Get clear. That's an order. Get the vagrant to a safe distance and wait for us." "Wait for you? How are you getting out?" Her voice was laced with a dawning horror. I looked at the viewport. On a secondary screen, I saw a schematic of the ship's exterior. The bridge of an architect dreadnought wasn't just a command center. It was a self-contained vessel, an escape pod for the entire command staff. The commander couldn't use it because he was a ghost, and the ship was locked in its final battle. But the battle was over, and I was alive. "I'm about to find out if this thing has a detach sequence," I said, my hands flying over a new set of controls. "We're taking the scenic route." With a deafening shriek of tearing metal and a violent lurch, the entire bridge section of the Star Eater separated from the dying vessel's main body. We were thrown into a wild, uncontrolled spin. A tiny lifeboat cast adrift from a sinking Titan. Behind us, the rest of the dreadnought, a decapitated ghost, continued its final, silent plunge into the blazing heart of Kilion Prime. We had survived, but we were tumbling through space in a stolen piece of alien technology, with the secrets of a dead civilization locked in our heads, and a very long way from home. There's a unique and profoundly unsettling silence that follows the tearing of metal in a vacuum. One moment, we were at the epicenter of a symphony of destruction, the roar of a dying ship, the shriek of parting hull plates, the crescendo of 1,000 alarms. The next, there was nothing, just the gentle, rhythmic hum of the bridge's internal life support and the sight of our former tombstone, the decapitated body of the Star Eater, shrinking as it fell gracefully into the maw of Kilion Prime. We were adrift. A mode of alien architecture tumbling end over end. The starfield outside the viewport, a dizzying, nauseating carousel. Jax was the first to recover, his genetically engineered constitution shrugging off the brutal G-forces. He unstrapped himself from the console he'd been clinging to and moved with a strange, zero-gravity grace to check on Spark. The kid was pale and unconscious, a thin trickle of blood from his ear tracing a dark path across his cheek. "He's alive," Jax grunted, his voice a low rumble in the sudden quiet. "Just pushed his brain too hard. Kid's not built for this kind of pressure." I unbuckled myself, my own body screaming in protest. Every muscle ached, and my head felt like it was stuffed with cotton and broken glass. We had survived. The thought was so absurd, so improbable, that it took a moment to land. We had stared into the void, talked to a ghost, and ridden a 500-year-old bomb into the sun, and we were still breathing. That thought was immediately followed by a less pleasant one. We were breathing recycled air in a stolen, powerless, and very small piece of a much larger, now incinerated, ship. Lena's voice, tinny and distant, crackled in my comms. "Elias, do you read the vagrant's long-range sensors are picking up a piece of debris. Energy signature is faint, but stable. Is that you?" Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. "It's us. Lena," I managed, my voice hoarse. "We took the express elevator. The bridge detached. How's our bird?" "She's fine," Lena replied, the stress still evident in her voice, but underscored by a tremor of disbelief. "A little shaken. I'm bringing her around for retrieval. Just try not to drift into any asteroid fields before I get there." Docking with the detached bridge, which we'd unofficially christened the command pod, was a delicate and nerve-wracking procedure. The pod had no maneuvering thrusters, no docking clamps of its own. It was a cork in the ocean, and Lena had to bring the Vagrant in slow and steady, using the hauler's oversized magnetic grapples to latch onto the pod's hull without cracking the canopy. She performed the maneuver with the grace of a surgeon, and soon we were being reeled in, a strange, elegant fish caught on a rusty hook. The moment the airlock pressure equalized, Lena was through it, her face a mixture of fury and overwhelming relief. She didn't say a word, just walked straight up to me and punched me in the shoulder. Hard. "Don't you ever do that to me again," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Then she threw her arms around me, a fierce, desperate hug that spoke more than words ever could. We were a family, a dysfunctional, debt-ridden, constantly in peril family, but a family nonetheless. We moved Spark to the Vagrant's small medbay, where a diagnostic drone confirmed he had a severe concussion and neural strain but would recover. With the immediate crisis over, the sheer, staggering weight of what we had accomplished and what we now possessed began to sink in. The command pod was more than just a lifeboat. It was the brain of the most advanced warship ever built, and its last commander had, in his final moments, downloaded its secrets directly into my head. The data wasn't a simple file transfer, it was a memory, an experience. When I closed my eyes, I could see star charts for systems humanity didn't even know existed. I understood the principles of reality-bending weaponry and the elegant, terrifying mathematics of architect engineering. I saw glimpses of their civilization, cities of living crystal, art forms woven from light and sound, and I felt the cold, creeping dread of the Githar, a species so brutally nihilistic that their ultimate goal wasn't conquest, but the heat death of the universe, a project they were pursuing with religious zeal. Most importantly, I had the coordinates to the silent archive. It was a whisper in my mind, a safe harbor, a final repository of a civilization's entire existence. It was also, I knew with a chilling certainty, the most valuable and dangerous secret in the galaxy. "So, what's the play, boss?" Jax asked, his voice pulling me from my reverie. We were on the Vagrant's bridge, the command pod safely secured in our oversized cargo bay. "We've got a piece of alien tech that'll make every government and corporation from here to the Galactic core foam at the mouth. We could sell this thing for enough to buy our own system and paint a target on our backs the size of a nebula." Lena countered, her arms crossed. "The moment we try to sell this, the story gets out. The people who buy it will want to know where we got it. And if they find out about the Star Eater, they'll want to know what else we found. They'll tear us apart, mentally and physically, to get what you have in your head." Elias. She was right. We were no longer just salvagers. We were custodians of a secret that could either save the galaxy or tear it apart. The knowledge of the architect's weapons, of Echo's kiss, in the wrong hands, could lead to wars that would make the architect-Githar conflict look like a border skirmish. "We can't sell it," I said, the decision solidifying in my mind. "And we can't just sit on it. The Githar? They weren't wiped out. The commander's memory was clear on that. The hegemony was shattered, but remnants survived. They scattered, went into hiding, and they're still out there, nursing a 500-year-old grudge. The implication hung heavy in the recycled air. The Gathar were not just a historical footnote. They were a dormant threat. And we had just kicked the hornet's nest by destroying one of their most hated enemies' relics. It was only a matter of time before they heard the whispers, before the strange energy signatures from our encounter drew their attention. "The silent archive," I said, looking at my crew. "That's our destination. It's the only place that might have the knowledge, the technology, toys, to fight the Gathar if they resurface. It's the only place we can take the command pod where it won't be turned into a weapon." The journey to the coordinates the commander had given me was a long one, across uncharted space, through cosmic phenomena that made the Kellyon Abyss look like a waiting pool. We had to push the Vagrant's aging fusion drive to its absolute limit and beyond. Spark, once he recovered, was in heaven. He practically lived in the command pod, reverse engineering what he could. His initial reverence for the tech replaced by a frantic, obsessive need to understand it. He managed to interface the pod's power core with the Vagrant systems, giving our old hauler a boost of clean, terrifyingly efficient architect energy. Our speed and maneuverability increased tenfold. We were a rusty pickup truck with the engine of a Formula One race car. The journey took weeks spent in a state of heightened paranoia. Every ship on our sensors was a potential threat. Every garbled transmission a possible warning. We ran silent, a ghost ship slipping through the cracks of the galaxy. During that time, the data in my head began to settle. It was less like a memory and more like a part of me. I started to understand the architect's philosophy, their deep, almost spiritual connection to the universe's fundamental forces. I also understood their greatest flaw, their arrogance. They believed they could control anything, even a weapon that unmade reality. They were wrong, and it cost them everything. We finally arrived in a system designated only by a string of complex architect glyphs. It was an anomaly, a single, stable, garden-like planet orbiting a white dwarf star, a feat of stellar engineering that should have been impossible. As we approached the planet, our sensors were flooded with a powerful, targeted signal. It wasn't a warning or a threat. It was a key, a complex data packet that resonated with the information in my mind. On the planet's surface, a section of what looked like a mountain range shimmered and dissolved, revealing a vast, crystalline structure beneath, an entrance large enough to swallow a fleet. "Well," Lena breathed, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. "They certainly know how to make a hidden door." As we guided the Vagrant into the subterranean hangar, the scale of the silent archive became apparent. It was a city, a world carved into the planet's core. Towers of light reached up into artificial skies, and rivers of pure energy flowed through channels of polished obsidian. It was silent, immaculate, and utterly empty. We had found the last bastion of the architect civilization, a library containing the knowledge of 1,000,000,000 years, and we were the only ones there. We landed on a designated platform that seemed to hum in welcome. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of safety, of peace, but it was fleeting. As we disembarked, a new presence entered my mind, far older and more powerful than the commander's ghost. It was a calm, dispassionate, and infinitely vast consciousness. The archive's caretaker, its warden. "You are not of the firstborn." The thought echoed, not in my mind, but in the very atoms of my being. "You carry the memory of a warrior, but you are something else, something chaotic. Explain your presence in this sacred place." Before I could formulate a response, an alarm blared through the archive, a sound so pure and piercing it felt like a physical blow. On the Vagrant's main screen, a red alert flashed. A fleet of ships had just jumped into the system, their energy signatures jagged and aggressive. Their hulls were a nightmarish fusion of salvaged metal and organic, bony growths. Their insignia was a stylized skull, a symbol of cosmic death that I recognized instantly from the commander's memories. The Gathar had found us. They had followed our energy trail across the galaxy, and they had brought an armada to the doorstep of their most hated enemy's last secret. The archive was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield, and we were caught in the middle. The Gathar armada was a festering wound in the clean, impossible sky above the silent archive. Their ships were a blasphemy of design, jagged asymmetrical things of bone-white plating and cancerous, pulsating organic components. They didn't glide, they clawed their way through the void. And their arrival was heralded not by a clean tear in space-time, but by a sickening, green-hued rupture that seemed to decay the very fabric of reality around it. The warden's alarm was not a sound, but a feeling, a wave of cold, analytical dread that washed over us, a perfect, sterile terror. The voice in my being spoke again, its dispassionate tone a stark contrast to the apocalyptic scene unfolding on our screens. The contamination has followed you. Protocol dictates sanitization. The archive will be scoured. Its knowledge will be atomized to prevent capture. A noble and efficient end. I stared at the main viewer, at the Gathar fleet deploying into an attack formation, and I felt a surge of purely human rage. Efficient? You call extinction efficient? I yelled at the empty air. That's the same thinking that got your creators killed. They built a perfect tomb and a perfect weapon and died because they didn't have the common sense to see they needed a shield. Jax was already at the Vagrant's weapon console, a useless gesture against an armada. But it was his gesture. Boss, the planet's defenses are coming online. Outside, the crystalline peaks of the artificial mountain range began to glow. Lances of pure white energy, impossibly bright and focused, shot into orbit, striking the lead Gathar cruisers. The beams were devastatingly powerful, slicing through the alien ships as if they were made of wet paper. But there were too many of them. For every ship that was vaporized, 3 more moved to take its place. Their own weapons spitting streams of corrosive, reality-degrading energy that splattered against the planet's shields, making them hiss and boil. The architect defense was perfect, precise, and utterly predictable. The Gathar, masters of chaos, were already adapting, sending in smaller, faster ships in erratic patterns to overwhelm the targeting systems. The defense is failing, the warden stated. A simple observation of fact. Probability of system breach in 37 standard minutes. Self-destruct sequence initiated. The end is logical. Stop it! I commanded, walking to the center of the Vagrant's bridge. Feeling the warden's immense consciousness focused on me. You are more than just a protocol. The commander of the Star Eater gave me his memory so it wouldn't be lost, but so it could be neatly erased by his own library. You have the knowledge of 1 billion years here. Is your only solution to a problem to burn the book? Knowledge that is captured by the contamination is a weapon against all existence. The warden replied, its logic impeccable and infuriating. The Gathar seek not to learn, but to unake. My purpose is to prevent that at all costs. Then change the cost. I shot back, the memories of the architect commander giving me the words, the concepts. Your creator's flaw was their rigidity. They saw the universe as a set of equations to be solved. They couldn't handle a variable they hadn't created. We are that variable. We're messy and illogical, and we fight back with everything we have. even when logic says we've already lost. I press my hands to my temples, focusing the data stream, the gift from a dead man. Don't you see, the commander's final act wasn't just to give me a key to a library. It was a plea. He was passing the torch, admitting his way had failed. He gave his legacy to humanity because we don't just build weapons, we build hope, even when it's irrational. A new voice joined the conversation, soft and melodic. Lena. She had her hand pressed against the crystal wall of the command pod. Her eyes closed. "It's afraid," she whispered. "The archive. It's not just a machine. It's alive, in its own way. It sings, and right now, its song is terrified. It doesn't want to die." That was it. The crack in the perfect and logical facade. Survival is a primal imperative. The warden's thought amended, a hint of something new in its tone. But the parameters for survival are not met. "Then let us meet them!" Spark yelled from his console, his hands flying as he interfaced the command pod with the vagrant systems, and through them, with the archive's network. "I have the commander's command protocols from the pod's memory banks. We can access the core systems, but we need you to grant us permission. We need you to trust us. Trust is not a function of my programming." "Then learn it," I roared, making a final, desperate gamble. "I'll make you a deal, you overgrown calculator, a very human deal. We are your new inheritors. Give us the tools, and we will be your sword. We will not let your creator's memory be extinguished, and we will not let the Gathar win. We will fight for your survival as if it were our own. That is a function of our programming. Or you can stick to your logic, and we can all die here together. Your choice. Live with the chaos, or die with the order."
Let's wait.
For a long, agonizing moment, there was silence, broken only by the distant thud of Gathar weapons striking the planetary shield. The fate of everything rested on the decision of a ghost mind in a machine world. Then, the voice returned, and its tone had fundamentally changed. It was no longer just observing, it was participating. New variable has been introduced. The logic of guaranteed extinction versus the chaotic probability of survival. The equation is compelling. Access granted. Inheritors. The entire planet shuddered. A wave of energy, so powerful it felt like a physical presence, rolled out from the core. Every light in the archive brightened. Every system surging with a power that had been dormant for 500,000 years. Deep beneath us, in caverns the size of solar systems, ancient forges roared to life. Automated foundries and nano-assemblers, designed to build cities and terraform worlds, were repurposed. "It's not just a library," Spark breathed, his eyes wide as he watched the data stream. "It's a factory, a Genesis engine. It's building. Oh my God." On the main viewer, our perspective shifted as the warden granted us access to the external defenses. We saw it happen. From hidden silos all across the planet, a new fleet of ships rose into the sky. They were based on the Star Eater's elegant, deadly design, but they were smaller, faster, and built not for a single, final battle, but for a long, brutal war. They were unmanned drones, a swarm of silver blades controlled by the archive's central mind. But a swarm needs a queen. The drones require a tactical nexus. The warden informed us, a mind to guide them with a creative unpredictability they lack. Your vessel, the Vagrant, is crude, but its fusion with the command pod systems makes it a unique interface. You will lead the first wave. My blood ran cold, then hot. Lena smiled. a fierce, predatory grin. Jax cracked his knuckles, a sound like breaking rocks. "Just tell us where to point," he said. The hangar doors above us dissolved into light. Power from the archive flowed directly into our ship, making the old hauler groan and sing with energies it was never meant to contain. We ascended from the planet's core, a single, rusty, patchwork ship at the head of a silent, gleaming armada of 1,000 ghost warriors. The Gathar fleet, busy pounding on the shields, didn't see us coming until it was too late. We didn't engage them with formations or honor. We hit them like a pack of wolves, a very human tactic. I gave the orders, but it was my crew that made it work. Lena listened to the enemy fleet, anticipating their movements before they happened. Jax used our newly supercharged weapons with brutal, pinpoint efficiency, targeting the organic, vulnerable parts of the Gathar ships. Spark, wired directly into the drone network, unleashed them not in waves, but in a chaotic, swirling storm that defied all conventional tactics. A guitar solo of pure destruction. We were no longer just a crew. We were the nerve center of a vengeful god. The Gathar were stunned. They had come expecting a static, predictable defense. Instead, they faced an enemy with the precision of the architects and the feral madness of humanity. They broke, their lines shattered, and their ships, those horrors of bone and metal, began to retreat, clawing their way back to the decaying ruptures in space from which they'd come. We didn't let them. We hounded them. We savaged their rear guard, sending a clear, undeniable message across the void. The archive was under new management. As the last Gathar ship vanished, a profound silence fell over the system. The drone fleet, their purpose served, returned to their hidden silos, their silver hulls gleaming in the light of the white dwarf. We were alone again, floating in the quiet dark. We were alive. We were victorious. But we were no longer just salvagers. I looked around the bridge of the Vagrant at the faces of my family. Jax, reloading the weapon capacitors with a grim satisfaction. Spark, passed out in his chair from sheer neural exhaustion, a triumphant smile on his face. Lena, her hand still resting on the command pod, her eyes open and filled with the light of distant stars. The warden's voice echoed one last time, no longer a machine, but a partner. The Gathar will return. The war is not over. It has just begun. I knew it was right. This was just the first battle. But something had changed forever. Humanity was no longer the junkmen picking through the ruins of a greater age. We were the heirs to that age, its guardians and its future. We had a home, a purpose, and the greatest arsenal the galaxy had ever known. I looked out at the starfield, a vast, dark frontier filled with monsters and wonders. And for the first time, I wasn't just thinking about the next fuel payment. I was thinking about the next fight. "All right," I said, my voice steady and clear in the quiet of the bridge. "Let's get started."